Hello and welcome to the Hardware Diversity Discussion Podcast. Thank you very much for coming in chat and saying hello, everybody. Just so I let you know, before we get started and all that sort of stuff, we don't pay too much attention to chat. There might be, if there's, subs or follows or bits or raids or anything like that, I might interrupt the conversation for that. But if you do have any questions or anything related to what we're discussing here throughout the conversation, then save them till the end. We are going to sort of open up the floor a little bit. We don't have terribly long, so we're going to probably have to rush through a few topics and may cut a few out. But yeah, a lot to do with Nvidia, a few things about power supplies and whatnot. But yeah, we'll give the man a chance to introduce himself as well, But yes, feel free to chat amongst yourselves until we get to the end. Yeah, because sound alerts, the alert box is turned off, and everything is awesome. Wow, awesome stuff. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Cool. Alright, so we'll introduce the man himself. Say hello to... I'll unmute Discord actually before I do that, because that would be really stupid. Clank41. Say good day.
Hi, how you doing?
I'm good. Yourself? Yeah.
I'm doing really good.
I'm glad to hear it. Yeah, so I suppose like everybody I do with this show, a little bit about yourself, sort of what got you into streaming, what you're about, where we can find you and all that sort of stuff, so we can sort of, know who you are.
Sounds good, yeah. So I'm Clank41, literally everywhere. You can just type that in and find me.
Yeah.
I do variety streaming, so just kind of whatever tickles my fancy at that point in time. Right now it's GTA 5 RP, but I played tons of different games, like all sorts of like survival games mostly, but like a touch of horror games here and there, adventure, whatever I feel like. And then I'm also a musician on the side. Yeah. And then I also work at a computer store where we sell computer hardware. So it's nice to be on a show that circles around that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's really neat. I was, I guess I was sort of starting to get to know, our team and stuff like that, and sort of getting to know everybody's sort of fine interests, and it's just thought, oh, okay, someone was really keen to come and say good day and have a chat. So this is sort of the first member of our team to sort of put their name up and say good day. So I'm really, really glad to have that opportunity, and I'm really looking forward to today's discussion. It's sort of going to be quite different, and I'm hoping that we can sort of nut out a few details and see where we're at, I suppose, with where we think things are going to go. So yeah, sure. Anything else here before we get going with the document? No. Oh yeah, anything sort of other than you working at a computer shop, anything sort of tech wise you thought, oh, that'd be interesting to sort of share and have a bit of a conversation piece a bit about as well. Maybe keep it a little bit short, but yeah, anything is that, I'd be interested about, a little bit quirky, a little bit out there, that might interest me. Yeah.
I thought it was super interesting how CD Projekt Red announced a new Witcher game, or at least something in the Witcher universe, but they're not using their own engine for the first time in years. They're going to be using Unreal 5, which blew me away. I was like, really?
Yeah, true. I mean, I suppose, like, they probably realised that, to their engine, they're probably developing a new one from scratch, because even with Cyberpunk, it was just like a really heavily modified version of one they used on 3, was it? I'm not quite
That's
sure.
Correct, yeah.
Yeah, so it's like they're probably, I'd say maybe they're taking time out to develop something from scratch. So maybe that's sort of what I'm thinking of, if they're going to be sort of need something in the intermediate period to get them by until they take it to the next level.
I mean, maybe. I know that Unreal 5 is becoming kind of the industry standard, especially for development on the new consoles, because it's already like seamlessly streamlined into their like architecture.
Yeah.
Whereas like trying to develop an engine that's not only good for PC and good for the types of processors being used in consoles, which are the same but different. I think a lot of the behind the scenes execution becomes really difficult to custom develop for, but because Unreal's already like had that relationship and created those pipelines, it's super easy just to drag and drop your content, your models, your textures into the engine and just start going. Yeah. So I think they're just trying to like make things go a little faster so that development can finish, in enough time for the company not to go bankrupt.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, because I know like the amount of time between games, through them has been quite extended, I suppose, and it's I think, as you said, if we waited around till if GTA 6 ever does sort of come out in the next decade, whether they have the funding to be able to keep themselves going until then. So yeah, completely agree. Yeah, cool. Okay, so we're going to talk Nvidia. I suppose it's very apt for your colours and everything that's going on around your branding, I suppose, but just happens to be that way. I could have changed up the document, but I still already had it going, so I thought might as well continue on with that. So we'll start off with so RTX 4000, I suppose. That's the big talking point at the moment. The Ada Lovelace GPUs. It's pretty wild, actually. Like, I guess, they're always pretty exciting, always lots of big claims and things like that, but I think with how crazy things are going, it's almost like they have to do something pretty big. And I suppose the only way to really increase performance now is just by jamming more power into it. I suppose, realistically speaking, they're going up, potentially. We'll talk about that a little bit later, but 600 watts of total board power, looking like it may be, the ceiling of which they're looking to achieve with the next gen stuff. 3090 Ti's coming out pretty shortly. We're going to talk. Maybe I think we might be able to fit that in.
Probably, yeah.
But yeah, that's sort of going to that's going to be rumored to be the teaser for what the next gen is going to look like in terms of board design, power design, and even a little bit of the performance by looks of it. Because normally with the Ti series of cards, they don't normally increase performance that much more. But it looks like with what's going to go into it, it's going to be fairly close to maybe mid to high range of what the next gen is going to look like as well. So we're looking at a 5nm process. They're going to go back to TSMC because I realise that Samsung just sort of dropped the ball completely with the RTX 3000 series. Their node was
very badly
inferior to what they were looking at, and I suppose with chip shortages and what was going on at the time, I guess they didn't have a lot of a choice with if they're going to increase production and manufacturing to the level they needed to get RTX 3000 out there as much as they could. AMD had priority usage, and Apple taking a majority of what's going on with them. So they really had to go with someone else, and Intel hadn't developed their 7nm nodes yet. So it's like there's a lot of compromises they had to make, and I suppose now being able to push forward with a really competitive product, looking like they will go back with TSMC for them. Looking like 18,000 CUDA cores to 92 teraflops. I'm not sure if that's quite correct. Maybe it could be FP16, so half precision compute could be that high. But it looks pretty crazy if that's going to be anything more than just really the real hard, the real easy math to go through. So it's pretty crazy to see what's going to go on with them. I guess what what I want to hear from you is, like, have you been reading up on this stuff, and what do you sort of see happening with sort of in terms of performance, the design, a little bit about what we're looking at with sort of that sort of stuff. So yeah, I guess there's a little bit about like what people think it's going to look like in terms of the shader models and the core counts and stuff like that. We could sort of have that up while you're having your discussion. But yeah, what have you been reading? What have your opinions been so far?
So I mean, a lot of what I've been reading is what you had up there. Because like it looks like we read a lot of the same tech websites, but been paying attention specifically to what's the name of the website? There's a forum site. I can't remember the name off the top of my head right now, but dig through there pretty often because there's a lot of like rumors and leaks that go through it, and they are saying that like 18,000-ish CUDA core count. I don't know if you do 18,432. I think it's probably going to be closer to like 18,192 or something like that. Like it's going to be some sort of cutback variant. Comparatively, because like that count is like the maximum size for that chip, physically speaking, which wouldn't make sense for them to release out the gate.
Exactly.
But the power requirements are definitely going to be, from what I'm reading, about 600 watts for the GPU.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you caught the more recent article from Intel, but they actually released the ATX 5.0 spec for power supplies.
Gonna be covering that very shortly. Yes. Yeah. So.
Gotcha.
So that's sort of, hinting at the fact that if it's going to be out there and, talking about that very shortly about manufacturers are going to be doing their stuff with, adding, that spec into their new gen of supplies as well, means that it's looking like it's going to be a pretty quickly adopted standard, which is crazy considering the fact that, normally standards take a little bit to adopt as as widely as they normally are, but this one looks like it's going to be sort of pushed out the gate pretty quickly. So, and hopefully, because it looks like this sort of stuff may be released before the end of the year, maybe early next year. And it looks like AMD's looking to use it as well for the next gen cards. So it's as I said, it's pretty quickly going to be picked up, but it could be there needs something, and I guess we'll talk a little bit more about that shortly as well. But so as you sort of saw in the core counts as well, we're looking at probably 84 for the card down. So that's quite a big. So I'm thinking that would be the 80 class card will be running on there, and then 70 class will look like about 60 shader units. Maybe the 60 for 36 and maybe the 50 for 24. So it's pretty. It's going to be pretty nuts to see. Maybe 84 might look like closer to maybe the 3090 Ti performance perhaps, but it'll probably be higher than that by a wee way as well. But it's interesting. It's certainly interesting to see how much further they're going to go, and what the overall scheme of things is going to look like. Because it's exciting. Like it's going to be an interesting race, I think, because like before with the whole AMD and Nvidia stuff, like you sort of have hope for the underdog to come through and to sort of see where they end up, but looking at what's been out there with the RTX 6000, the RTX 6006. My God, my English is broken. It's only 11:30 in the morning. The RX 6000 series, it's a lot closer of a race, and I think if they both get their heads together, and obviously Intel coming into the ring as well, looking like that, they're going to interrupt a few places in the lineup there too. So. Definitely looking forward to discussing that a little bit more closer to their launch, so I think that's coming up very, very shortly as well. So it's TechSpot. This looks like an earlier article, but they're saying an 800 watt total board power. That's going to be a bit.
That's too much. No, it's the maximum they could do, even with that altered power connector, is going to be 675, because you're getting the maximum of 600 off that 12 pin and then 75 from the PCI Express slot. And if they go any further than that, then they're going to have to either add another like 12 plus 8 or something ridiculous, and it's just going to overload any power supply that isn't 1200 watts or higher.
Exactly.
And then you have to consider the amperage on the 12 volt rail to run the card in the first place. So it wouldn't make sense to do 800.
No, I don't think so. No.
600 I could see as like the top maximum peak for video cards for probably the foreseeable future.
Yeah, I think that's where they're going to jump to, because they've sort of been hanging around 300 sort of as a theoretical sort of where they want to sort of see things sit for a long time, and I think if they're going to be, it's going to be harder to cram more performance out of that, at the high end. So it's like, they needed to do something, and I suppose... we can talk about the ATX 12 volt stuff now, but the Obviously, video cards. You're probably not a big fan of the website, but it's all right. It's out there. It's sort of
it's not bad. It
right.
has some good information. So
it does. Yeah.
I think the important thing to consider when it comes to the video cards is going to be that there's a lot of rumors flying around saying that they're going to launch the 4000 series this September, which I sincerely doubt, because it's only been just over a year for 3000. Usually they have like a 2.5 year cycle before they start considering the next gen. So anybody who's reading articles stating that it's going to come in September, unless Nvidia pulls something out of their butt, like right away.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, it's not going to happen. Yeah.
No,
not. I would say end of year, maybe start of next year, but it's so I think you're right with that. But this is actual information. This has obviously come from the it looks like it's actually come from the Intel website, so we can pretty well trust that this is correct. But it looks like there is going to be about 4 different connectors that are going to be able to be used on power supplies with the ATX 3.0 spec, or the ATX HPWR connector. It's kind of hilarious, but high power connector, or the PCIe Generation 5 connector as well, but it looks what it's going to be named as there too. So obviously the top end is a 600 watt, then the 450, 300 sort of makes sense because that's sort of what's out there now, I think, and then the 150 sort of going to be simulating just a single 8-pin connector there too. So it's interesting that they're going to allow that, I think, because to me I think it's almost going to confuse people unless they have things really well labeled on the actual card that you buy. What would happen, right, if you bought a power supply? Let's say you bought like a 500 or 600 watt power supply that's got this ATX 3.0 spec, and it's got like a 300 watt cable on it. Like that's all it has, let's say.
Right.
And you plug in a 4090. What's going to happen? Like, I know it probably won't work because the data pins will probably tell you that it's going to be like, no, I'm not turning on because this just isn't happening. But how are you going to make it clear to people that they're not going to be doing that, running into that sort of situation? Because it's confusing enough for people as it is. Like buying a power supply, people think, that anything's going to do, I'm just going to plug it in. People even still use Molex to 8-pin power connectors, right? Like, that's still a thing. And it's like, in it, obviously there's no protection on those, so it won't tell you whether it won't work. It'll just explode or melt or whatever, or catch on fire. But it's like, now you're running into the case of saying, this connector looks like this connector, it's got a different label on it, but how do you know what your graphics card's going to want? People think, it's just got the 12-pin connector on it, so it's just going to work, right? So how are they going to...
I think that'll be like limited to people who don't read instructions, essentially. Like if you're not reading the box or reading the instructions that come with it, like there's probably going to be like a big sticker on the anti-static bag that comes with them saying like needs a 600 watt, 12 pin or like whatever.
Right, yeah.
I'm sure that they're already thinking about ways to stop people from starting a fire, but the good news with these connectors and the way that power supplies work in general is that they'll plug in, say if they plug in a 600 watt to a 4060 that only needs a 300 watt, it's still going to work because the card draws the power it needs. The power supply doesn't push 600 watts at all times.
No.
So it's, as long as you buy more than you think you need, you'll be safe. But if you're not buying enough, then you're right, it just won't fire up, right?
Yeah, and it's just going to be like, I hope they do make it clear as they possibly can for people because, as I said, how quickly the spec is going to be rolled out, looking like, in the next sort of 6 to 8 months is when there are going to be people requiring to do this. And it's like, what are they going to be able to, how are they going to be able to monitor the fact that people, as I said, don't read instructions? Because there's a lot of people who do build computers, and I suppose a lot of people trying it for their first time as well, because, that's just what people do, and, they go, okay, this is going to work, and not really, but, they're going to give it a go anyway. And how they're going to, because it's going to release 100 watts of power, and then 150 watts when they release the signal to, because they're just doing it through ground, which is kind of interesting. So like you're basically opening and closing ground wires with the sense. So it's kind of interesting that you could actually like, you could almost hack the power supply to think that you can deliver more power than it's able to, which is kind of interesting. And then after software configuration, I guess there must be some sort of processor within the power supply almost to tell it to. Yeah, I mean that's kind of interesting how they're saying that. We can feed you this much, but if you don't tell the power supply that I need more, then I won't give you more. Like, I'm wondering how they're able to do. That. Is it a driver communication thing? Is it some sort of handshake between some sort of processor on the power supply? That's kind of interesting too. I wonder how they're doing that.
What's going to happen probably is there's going to be a firmware chip on the power supply that sends a signal to the GPU, and the GPU is going to have on firmware saying, this is what I need, and it's probably going to be an auto switch as opposed to like something manual you have to do.
Yeah.
You can tell here in the diagram how it says that there's, sets of 4 plus 2 pins, so like 8 pins total. That's a 12-pin connector, leaving 4 more pins for data delivery. So you're going to have 2 pins as send, 2 pins as receive.
Those pins are actually extra, I believe. I think they're actually I think it's actually a 16-pin connector. I'd seen a picture actually, because they said that the 12, then they've got the 4 sense wires on top of that as well. So I think they're actually like they're kind of tiny wee pins. It's kind of weird how they're doing it, but I think that's a later and a new update to this. I didn't quite put that in here, but they're saying that those are the sense pins. So that's kind of
so it'll just be a data delivery for the firmware of the power supply to say, am I 600 watts or am I 375? Like
exactly.
On the top row there, it's like, what do you need? And the video card is going to say, well, I need 600, and the power supply is going to be like, okay.
It's kind of interesting because like that's the first time I've ever heard of power supplies sort of having that level of control and configuration, and communication with the stuff they're plugged into, because I suppose there is like that voltage protection, the overcurrent protection, and all that sort of stuff that it does internally. But actually talking about external sources, this is certainly the first time that I've ever encountered that. And that's what I was thinking: is there some sort of processor or some maybe firmware chip sort of that's able to have some sort of data bus to the actual stuff it's plugged into as well? I'm wondering if they'll eventually do that with like the 8-pin power supply connector for like your CPU power too. Thinking maybe
they've kind of actually they've already done that a little bit where if you look at digital power supplies that Corsair released, now they're the only company that's done such a thing so far, but they have the AX 1200 and 1600i, which is a digital 1 and 0 gate power supply. So they already have power supplies with the concept of firmware boards, and I know that Corsair and Intel worked very closely with that 12-pin power spec, and I think that probably laid the groundwork or the foundation for the idea of the 12-pin connector and that daughter board exchange in the power supply saying this is what I am,
Yeah, I mean digital certainly I think Corsair was some of the first to do digital power supplies, and they had a bit of a rocky start, admittedly, with that, and but a lot of companies, NZXT do it now. Even the sort of the smaller brands and stuff have that sort of software that you're able to tell, read directly from the computer about what's going on each sort of pin, and not each pin but each connector, and read what the power a slightly different angle to power consumption than just reading it straight from your motherboard. So that's kind of cool. I mean, even Asus do it too, I suppose, with their designs as well. But I think you're right. I think definitely laying the groundwork for that. But also, I think this may be the last time we see 12 volts. Because I think realistically, the amount of current required to feed 600 watts over those tiny wee pins, you'd think, having a higher voltage, looking at, would increase, decrease the heat and power and size of the cables and everything to actually even pump further more power across it too, without. But as I said, it would have to you'd have to change the spec almost entirely again, because I'd say Intel's finally getting their way with 12 volts, because they were trying to roll out the ATX 12 volt spec, and because what they were trying to do is convince motherboard manufacturers to only use 12 volts. This was like a year or two ago, and I think there was just so much pushback from the community that they decided just to go, no, we're not going to do it. I think they maybe released a couple of motherboards, perhaps through Gigabyte, and they were just 12 volt only. They only had like one connector on the whole motherboard, and it was just 12 volts. So I think this is sort of their easing people way into thinking that you're going to require something like this to work in the future, and certainly with the high current capacity, lower voltages are just going to go away, because what actually uses 3.3 volts, what actually uses 5, like I don't know what uses 3. I know like M.2 slots, some of them do, and I know like some. Thank you very much, Tab. Sorry about ignoring your conversation there, but thank you. Appreciate you coming by, and this will be uploaded to YouTube. So if you want to catch the VOD, feel free to click on the links down below and have that there too. So it's crazy to think that maybe Intel's sort of starting to get people used to the idea of maybe having different connectors where they're needed for different things, because they were trying to do it and people were like, nah, but if we can convince people one by one, maybe we'll look at getting into it. But it's a little looking at the other side of the conversation there a little bit, but I thought that was quite interesting to see that how quickly things are changing in that regard. But because I've already seen ASUS put out power supplies. I think Corsair doing it. I've already released sort of teasing models or what's coming up with releasing them with these connectors on them. So it's happening really, really soon. They also there's I can't remember who it was, but I didn't put it in here. I was going to do it. I didn't find it though. Where they actually had to downrate their power supply because they said they were going to rate it for a 600 watt connector, but they were like, no, I haven't built my model well enough for a 600 watt connector. I'm going to have to put like I think it was a 450. I think they sort of because they had all this marketing material saying, oh yes, so we're going to be certified for the top end connector, and then they're like, no, we can't actually do that anymore. So they took down all their marketing and had to re-release it with saying that you actually were only built for the spec. So I thought that was quite hilarious to see that people are probably going to have to change their designs and their how well their supplies are built to cope with that, because maybe existing ones aren't quite going to cut the mustard, because it's a lot of dense power in one place, and to pull that all off at at a consistent basis is a fairly demanding thing to ask. Here we go. Using parallel circuits, relatively simple to 24 volts or something, and then have different circuits within that need the voltage. Yeah, you're probably not wrong. You're probably not wrong, actually. Yes, I would say that may be something to. Yeah, I think maybe in the future, because they're coming to the end of what 12 volts can offer, I think, in terms of the real high current. Because personally, I don't think they're going to ramp up the power requirements that much more. But I think seeing it now, and looking into the future, is saying 600 watts is a fair amount to ask, and maybe if requirements go up much more than that, I think realistically they're either going to have multiple connectors on one card, which is going to be ridiculous, or they're going to have to maybe do an ATX 4.0 spec and look at maybe having cards being able to have different voltage requirements. Perhaps I don't know. I don't know what they're going to do, but it's getting to the point where something has to be thought about, because I know this will last a while. Don't get me wrong. I don't think they're going to exceed 600 watts for a good while, but after what's going to happen after that? If they do decide to, make things much more in that sense. So, anything that you want to add to that with the connectors and power supplies and Intel specs and before we move on to the more software side of things?
No, I think we covered the most of it. I think that Lance is definitely right, and he's actually a friend of mine, one of the smarter friends of mine that I know, and I think that he probably has. I think he's probably onto something there. I think there definitely will be some higher tier power supplies. I think that having those multiple different types of connectors are obviously going to require a certain amount of wattage, because you can't put a 600 watt 12 pin on a 600 watt power supply, right? So
yeah, exactly.
But you have to consider the maximum, at least the maximum wattage in North America that you could run through a power plug is
1600
just over. No, it'd be more than that. It's up to 2100. I think you could do as a maximum.
Oh, you're running on 240 volt?
Oh no, 120.
Oh, 120. Oh, okay.
120 times 15 amps, 1800. Sorry, 1800 watts would be the maximum for a single plug. So it's either going to be, you'll see power supplies. Have specific labeling, or if they make a power supply big enough to run multiple cards, it's going to use 2 wall plugins.
That would be insane. I remember I saw a meme ages ago, I think it might have been maybe talking about RTX 4000, I'm not sure, but someone photoshopped onto the I/O connector of the card a jug cord. Socket, you just plug the wall straight into the card, and I thought that would be brilliant. But no, they're gonna maybe they might
just turn the breaker off and hook the computer directly up to the breaker, and then
just see what happens. Don't worry about it. But I know there's laptops out there that have multiple power supplies, right? You can buy. The real high-end ones have because I think they're limited to 300 or 400 watts per brick per adapter. So some of them require if they've got the full blown 2080 Ti and a desktop GPU. I think it's a 320 with a 385 peak. If you look at a lot of the newer MSI Trident series or some of the thin line Asus gaming desktops, they come with 2 power supplies that are laptop style, just to reduce the footprint. Very common. So maybe they might do because I have seen 2000 watt power supplies. I think EVGA has them, and I think there's a couple of other brands that have them as well. So I'd imagine if you're wanting to, because obviously you can't use them in the States. So, I'd say if they're wanting to run something like that, then yes, you would need 2 wall sockets. Maybe they might look at doing that. The problem is you'll need to hook them up to 2 separate fuses in the house, I suppose, because you trip them if you plug 2 in at a time.
It's going to depend on the age of the house, because newer houses are being wired up that each outlet individually is 15 amps.
Oh, okay. Yeah, right.
So that would give you 1800 watts per outlet, and you have 2 plugs on one outlet or whatever. So you get a maximum of 3600 watts from a technical standpoint. If it's a house built after I think it's 2003 or something, and everyone's using arc fault breakers and stuff like that. So it's there's going to be a difference there, but I think that we're going to see a maximum of 1800 watts here, and then if anyone wants to get something crazy, they're going to have to run 2 power supplies, which is something that's also supported with power supply jumpers, right? So
yeah. No, I've certainly seen some tricky hackery stuff going on there, and I know the guys who do extreme overclocking and stuff run multiple power supplies for their stuff. So it's certainly not unheard of, but it's just about finding a use outside of that for it. But I'm thinking maybe if they want to run a 3000 watt power supply, maybe you'd look at is you'd have multiple sockets running into the back of it, and look, and seeing whether you can actually, have those, do it that way. Because I'm not sure whether the use for it, maybe there probably isn't anything out there yet, but if you're running a couple of 600 watt cards, it's like might consider running at least 2000 for sure. So yeah, we'll have to have a look. We'll have to have a look at that. So I guess we're covering things I'm a little bit less familiar with, and that's sort of the software side. I'm not software talk NZ, so that's sort of not news to anybody. But yeah, obviously there was a bit of an driver hack and leak that happened over about a month ago, maybe a bit more than a month ago, and they'd found some shit about about drivers, their closed source nature of them, a little bit about their DLSS and their RTX source code, and I think, have they solved it yet? I'm actually not sure whether they actually, what they'd done, had they resolved what was going on? Have they sort of tracked these people down, and had they released the data that had come out of the 250 gigs that they'd stolen? Do you know?
What happened was Nvidia actually hacked them back.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah,
right.
they hacked them back, and then because they left they did a direct clone of a hard drive from a server that had all the data, but because they cloned the drive, it had the same hardware signature as the actual server, so they just sent a ping out and locked it down. They were still able to copy a lot of the data, but what it comes down to is NVIDIA's support. They support open source software. Their drivers aren't open source, and that's a lot of confusion coming around a lot of these news articles, and that's where I find that videocards.com tends to not necessarily fail the public per se, but they tend to communicate the most clickbait information. And then they often clear it up near the end of the article. I find, so it's usually not to say that you haven't read the whole thing, but what I'm saying is they often they want to sensationalize the concept, and then either they'll end the article with but this is just whatever, or they'll make an update later after NVIDIA says you should probably stop that or we're going to sue you, which looks to be the situation here. They haven't corrected or updated their article with the rest of the viable information. But it's what it comes down to is NVIDIA put a stop to the majority of it, and they never said that they were ever open source. They said they support open source software, so they have drivers that you can install for Linux, or it's actually really easy to add the NVIDIA drivers to Linux because of their naming conventions. They made it simple for users to write their own drivers because they wanted to give them that flexibility, because not everybody wants to run Windows. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, I mean, and I think the open source drivers on NVIDIA do have their benefits, I think, and also they're coming a long way in terms of being able to be better, because I think obviously with more people wanting to invest in that open source nature and the ability to, be completely free from DRM and all that sort of stuff, people are wanting to support that. So it's interesting that I completely agree that yes, there is parts of what they do is open source, and they're obviously with them supporting these single board computers and the Nintendo Switch and stuff. I can't imagine that being particularly closed source material, but it's going to be interesting to see the fact that they're saying that because all this technology that they in theory could be releasing open source, has AMD's got everything of theirs is open source by what I can tell. They should be able to open that up to say, it's a driver's a driver. It's not like it's a game, or it's not like it's Windows or whatever that people are they don't want people touching things. But is there any reason to keep that sort of stuff closed source? I don't know I'm just trying to think like what.
So I think when it comes to like PCB design and things like that, like the physical
absolutely.
function itself, it definitely should be closed source because there's a lot of proprietary detail there. When it comes to the software, I think that the main firmware, like the kernel itself, so to speak, should always be closed source because if you left it open source, it means that it's open to attack at all times.
Yeah, absolutely.
But if there were like a layer of open source like connectivity that could be altered or whatever else, I think that there would be a really great chance for Nvidia to open up and say like, okay, we're not going to give you like the heart, but here's the lungs and stomach and like here's the other layers that like operate next to it that you can alter and change to your heart's content. So you can go with like, let's say you have a 4090 and it comes with a 430 watt BIOS, for example.
Yeah.
But then they can say like, but if you want to, you can just simply go in there, bump it to 600 watts, crank the voltage in precision or afterburner or whatever you want to do.
Yeah,
and give you the flexibility of having that dynamic range of performance. Or they might say like, okay, this is a 4080 Ti, but if you want to go into the firmware and make it into a 4090, you can do that.
Yeah,
you're unlocking those extra cores, kind of like how with the original 6000 series, how you could flash a 6950 into a 6970 from the AMD side of things. This was like 10 years ago. But it was a matter of just, you just dump the firmware on, and AMD didn't care. They were like, we'll still warranty the cards. We don't care. It's the physical stuff we take care of.
Yeah, because it's like, I think it was almost like their initial batch of their cards. They forgot to fuse off that part. They forgot, because obviously they do it, even though a lot of yields are good enough that they don't actually have to take the lower tier stuff to actually have physical defects enough to release a separate tier of cards. So they just physically just fuse it off. So it's like I think they originally did that, but people were still flashing 6970 BIOSes onto the 6950 just to get that extra clock speed. The base clocks and the extra headroom above that you would get, because obviously the higher bin there as well would mean that in theory that you do actually get better headroom, even though I think a lot of the time the mid high end cards can actually overclock better than the top end, because the less cores that they have means that they can get better frequency out of them. But anyway, people are still doing it, and I guess that means that and yes, AMD I think did honour warranties in a lot of those sense, and I think there's only a couple of brands that really would go out of their way nowadays. Maybe like probably ASUS possibly would, and I know EVGA certainly would as well, in terms of honouring if you modified the card, in a hardware way or even a software way. If that did decide to break down, then we'll still be able to give you a replacement or fix it for you. But there's not a lot of brands out there that have that sort of heart anymore to be able to do that, and perhaps that's due to the fact that they don't want to warrant stupid people. Maybe, I don't know. I'm not sure, but it just seems that maybe it's a lot of effort for people. If Nvidia wants to change their stance, maybe the brands would as well. But it's I think it's because I think AMD are fairly happy with that sort of stuff still. I'm not 100% sure, but because I haven't looked into it too much in that sort of things. But I think maybe they may be a little bit more open than Nvidia are about that. Because I know, because I think didn't Nvidia try to lock people out of changing BIOSes and stuff?
They did for a while, and I think it's on there's one of the 30 series cards you just simply can't do it on, even though you can download the BIOS for it and you can tell it to flash and it just doesn't. I'm pretty sure it's the OEM version of the 3070, if I'm not mistaken.
Right.
I could be wrong, but one of those OEM versions, you just you can download the BIOS all you want and say, here's the new BIOS, and the card's just nope.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
It might have been a specific batch of them, but there is a series of the new generation of cards that's just I'm not going to take anything except what's on me. Yeah. So then if the BIOS bricks, you're pooped and there's no way to fix it.
Yeah, that's crazy. Interesting. Very interesting. Yeah. Yeah, I think there was, I think Nvidia, I think they also are trying to shut down places to download BIOSes from too. They've been pretty anti people tinkering with things over the last while. I've found, like, even going back to the RTX 2000 series, I think, were like, people were like, oh, I can't increase power limits, voltage. Like, they lock a lot of voltage out of things too. Like, you can't increase that on a lot of their cards as well. So it's interesting to see. It'd be interesting to see whether they do give that function, because I know EVGA don't care, and I think it's quite funny because they're like one of the tightest partners to Nvidia, and it's like, oh, okay, if they're able to just go ham and do whatever they feel, but no one else seems to have that same operability. We're sort of talking. There's a couple of. Why did I put 3 articles there? Something about DLSS being leaked. Yeah, that's interesting. The DLSS stuff's interesting, actually, because I guess, like, with FSR 2.0 coming out very shortly, because I guess for me it's like, do you actually, we'll take a bit of a tangent and then we'll come back to that as a question, but do you remember,
Sure.
Do you remember the like Minecraft RTX?
Yeah.
Like that tech demo they released pretty shortly after the cards were launched, or maybe just before the cards launched. They got into the game files and they found out that the RTX implementation in that game didn't use any RTX features, like in terms of any hardware encoding or decoding and encoding of the game files on using RTX hardware on the GPUs. And it's like, oh, well, that was quite fascinating, but they locked out AMD from playing that game. You can't actually launch that card on that game on the AMD GPU. I think it just detects it and just like, no, we can't do it. Even though quite clearly it seems that you can play RTX, play it on anything because it doesn't use RTX features. So and also actually going back further, I think there was something else that didn't use Nvidia stuff that I'm just trying to think that they sort of told people that yes, it does require it but doesn't use it. Oh, I just had some thought pop in my brain and now it's gone. I was on a different tangent there for a sec. But there was something else recently as well that I've forgotten completely. But anyway, it might come back into my head, and that it would be all good. But I'm just sort of thinking about your G-Sync. Yes. Yeah, obviously they got rid of the G-Sync module, didn't they? Because everything's using adaptive sync now, exactly.
Which is both G-Sync and FreeSync compatible. But the initial launch of G-Sync, it definitely was a marketing ploy, 100%, to sell hardware and sell higher tier stuff with the impression of, oh, you can get better frames in this. But then AMD came out and said, well, no, we can actually just they made FreeSync open source so anybody could use it. And then after a while, adaptive sync just kind of took over. So any newer monitors, like the one I'm using right now, is a monitor that has G-Sync compatible on the box. Yeah. But it just means it uses adaptive sync, and you can turn on G-Sync if you want to. Yeah,
I mean, I think that obviously, it was in actual, looking side by side between a G-Sync an actual G-Sync monitor back when they did use the module, and a comparable one that used FreeSync. They did have some extra features that the G-Sync module provided, the hardware was able to calculate the, if you exceeded the refresh rate of the monitor, how the implementation would deal with, tiering and stuff when you went above and below the range of where it would sit. I think the G-Sync did that better, and I think that was sort of a bit of a point of contention with FreeSync. It's like, oh, do you bother using FreeSync if you're you're going to be playing above the refresh rate of the monitor? But in terms of, I think they fixed that with later iterations of FreeSync, and they seem to be able to deal with it. Still not quite as good, but to the point where you wouldn't notice. It wouldn't be a real nail in the coffin of you buying a particular monitor versus another one because of how well it dealt with that. So, yeah, absolutely. And I guess going back to DLSS and what FSR is offering with their their super sample. What does FSR stand for? I've forgotten now. My brain's just gone off the tangent here now. But yeah, like their upscaling techniques that they use. Obviously, because AMD doesn't have any dedicated, like acceleration for this sort of stuff that Nvidia does. I'm wondering whether whether they'll find that DLSS can be implemented on AMD GPUs. I'm wondering whether that will be something they'll be able to look at finding out about with with software, because like if RTX was a bit, there's this is a feature for a game that we've got and it looks really good and it plays really well. It's like, and G-Sync it works really well and yeah, it does really well and yeah, we can do that. And it's like, how deep does this iceberg, you've seen those iceberg memes, haven't you, about the tip of the iceberg is just like, oh, this is DLSS, what does it mean? And then you go down further and it's just like all these tinfoil hat sort of situations where you sort of think, I'm wondering is there a way, I'm wondering if you could get it going, would it work? Sort of things, if you find this sort of stuff in the leak, like what sort of technology does it use and how well could that be transferred, is sort of what I was getting at with giving that preface.
So, yeah. I mean, DLSS doesn't necessarily use the RT cores, but it does have a bit of like a CUDA tie-in. So having the stream processors in the AMD-based cards instead of using CUDA would definitely, I think, cause a little bit of a reduction in the performance of technologies like DLSS.
Yeah.
But I think it could work from a technical standpoint, just not well.
Yeah. They've got there's two parts to the RT cores. There's the obviously that does just one that just does the lighting, but then they've got the AI part of it too, which is sort of tied into the SMs than it is to the RT stuff. It's sort of in between that, and it's sort of that's what they use to do like the upscaling, or to do the if they were calculating the accelerating the rays past what the RT cores are able to do. So it's kind of, they kind of implement it in a kind of a funny way, but it's sort of a 3-stage process that they do. And I was, because, it'd be interesting, because obviously RT doesn't work too well on AMD cards. It's not fantastic. Like, it works kind of, but it's not really something you'd want to do too much of. I'm just sort of being cognizant of time here. And it's like, it's just interesting to see whether that sort of does sort of, whether that would be something they'd be able to do. But yeah, it'd be interesting. So yeah, it could work. And obviously with those upscaling techniques anyway, there is a bit of a reduction in performance. Maybe it would be a little bit more if the software wasn't exactly compatible with the hardware as such. It's kind of like a driver related thing, I guess. It'd be interesting to see. Yeah, interesting to see what if we. I mean, like, there probably won't be any further updates to the story, and there probably won't be any official announcement or any announcements by anybody, but or it may even not be available on Linux. Maybe it will be. That'd be kind of cool if they did actually do that, which is what they were talking about in this particular article. But yeah, it was just an interesting part of the whole leak, because probably one of the most interesting part of the whole leak to me was that aspect of the DLSS sort of stuff like that, because it's definitely different, and also obviously the LHR bypass stuff that was happening as well. We could sort of, do you have anything on the like hash rate stuff that you want to quickly sort of talk about before we move on to a more open discussion towards the end here? LHR?
I mean, like about LHR or?
Yeah, LHR. Yeah.
Okay. With LHR, it's, I don't know. It was kind of like, it was almost needed to a certain degree. I think that a lot of like the crypto space was definitely eating up a lot of the available cards, and there was like thefts happening, and it got really, really messy for a while there. And I think that LHR, even though it's actually honestly pretty easy to bypass, you basically just start mining one coin, and then when that shits, you just start mining your second coin, and the second coin is what takes up all the bandwidth, and the first coin gets hit by that LHR firmware. I think that was still like a good way to like reduce the amount of people who maybe didn't understand crypto in a larger way from buying up all the cards in this big mad rush. Like when crypto had its first like major push, I sold an entire pallet of video cards to one company, like over $100,000 in video cards. These guys came in and bought. And it was like this ridiculous thing that it's like this company that is developing, like they were doing something actually quite different. They're actually using like blockchain to do something like beneficial to humanity.
Oh, cool.
But there was a lot of people coming in and buying like, 6, 12, 18, 20 video cards at a time just to do mining, just to make money or whatever. And then when those cards burn out, they're off the market. Nobody can game with them. And then they're just going to resell it to some dumb kid who doesn't know that they're burnt out, right? And it's a super common thing in that space, and it continues to be a common thing in that space. And I think LHR was a really great way to combat that by reducing the number of cards being purchased and the amount of like gray market secondhand cards or selling just dead hardware to people who didn't know.
Yeah, because there's a group that I'm in for like people who buy sell computers in New Zealand, like do pre-built sort of systems to go, and they were certainly felt that they were a little bit up in arms about the LHR stuff. Like they were like, oh, do we buy them for what I want to do, or do I buy them to sell to people? And it's like, because they were quite heavily involved in crypto as well. And I was like, oh, I mean, like, that's something I've never done and never probably will do. They asked me to sell my GP, and I was like, nah, get stuffed. And I was like, because it's a really good card to mine with. And I was like, nah, because I'll never be able to afford to replace it. But yeah, it was interesting because they were like, oh, do I buy LHR chips, or do I? Because they didn't want to like figure out that was at the point where they didn't have that LHR bypass. Like I didn't think it was at that,
Yeah.
And I think even now when they look at buying cards and stuff, people look at LHR when they're doing mining, and it's just like they still find it just a pain in the ass to get past. So it's like in terms of like actually going and doing it, like if they've got a whole system set up with all these cards that are in that camp, and it's like how do they they've got to do it to each, like change the BIOS or load the software that does it to each individual card, and it's like that would be annoying. So they're like, and I guess that maybe it did impact more than maybe I thought with the sales of cards to people who needed them rather than people who just wanted them. And that's certainly it could be a positive thing in that way. And I was just thinking, oh, it's certainly a gimmick. It certainly like felt like, oh, they were just trying to be good Samaritans, and that's cool. And obviously maybe they were, and it's seeing the insight from both of us there certainly sort of maybe helped paint that picture in that light. So yeah, that's cool. All right. Any closing thoughts on Nvidia? Just Nvidia in general. Like, what do you think about the future? What do you think about what's going on now? And before we move on.
I think we kind of covered all of it. I'm just excited to see what actually comes of all of it. That's kind of about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think you're right in that sense, because it's a lot of stuff's heating up, and I'm certainly excited to see, because I think this is the closest it's been for quite since the R9 series back then, when they're when AMD sort of just managed to drop the magic bullet and able to take the lead again with performance. And I think that sort of that hasn't happened for, well, it's been a decade now, pretty much, I think, since that happened. So maybe it's time for that to maybe see whether that pops around again. I think, and maybe Intel might come and steal that as well, because that'd be pretty cool too for them to interrupt that space. I don't think they will go all out for their first gen, but it'd be interesting.
I think Intel's going to squeeze right into like the middle range space really well for those who want like certified drivers, or like I think Intel's going to start doing a lot more with like render farms because they're going to have this like certified hardware that does the thing.
Right.
I think that's where they're really going to start to like come in, is more in like the commercial space, or like to the prosumers who want hardware for a specific purpose, or like Photoshop and video editing users. The Intel cards are probably going to be great for that. But I think when it comes to gaming space, it's going to be Team Red or Green for a very long time.
Interesting. Okay. Interesting perspective. Okay. Very cool. Okay, well, I think we'll move into like a more of like if anybody's sort of watching and waiting and listening in chat, we're going to be opening up the floor a little bit more. We've still got a couple of topics to discover and to talk about with sort of more fixed stuff. But then after that, we're certainly open for discussion as long as we have left. So we'll try and cover this off relatively quickly. So yeah, get your keyboard firing up, and we'll get to you very, very shortly. So we'll talk. Oh wow, that didn't quite work out, did it? No, it didn't. Oh well. Okay, we'll leave it there. That wasn't great. Obviously, I'd broken it from obviously last time I did this, which was really not good. Yeah, Steam Deck. Obviously, that's coming out. Well, that is out now to people who pre-ordered it really early, and people just like, let's stick Windows on it, and that wasn't great.
No, it was not.
But well, even though you kind of can do it, and you probably, I mean, if you really want to do it, I suppose you could. But yeah, no, it's not made for it. And no. I think people will think, it should be like a proper portable PC, and it is in a way. But it'll almost be like trying to run Windows on a console. You shouldn't do it.
That's what it comes down to, is that Windows doesn't support direct chip acceleration, and that's the major issue with it. It's kind of like having, some people tried to install like Windows, NT or Windows 98 on the Windows Phone that came out a few years back, and it didn't work because Windows never supported hardware acceleration the same way that like Android or Linux does.
Yep.
And that's the major issue with it. Is just the system is designed to run Linux or run Android. Like you could dump probably a variant of Android onto the Stream Deck, and I bet you it would work great once you get the control system.
Yeah.
But the OS, like Windows, is designed to run on specific type of execution protocols in order, and it doesn't agree with the chip that they used in the Stream Deck. Same thing if you were to install Windows on a Switch or exactly. Same thing.
And it's like, it's crazy like what they've managed to pack into it, and you'd think, well, if it runs Linux, it should run Windows. But I think for me, it's more of a driver thing, like how the hardware has been designed and integrated. It's just like they just don't have support for that yet. Like there'll probably come a time when maybe it is, but I think, as I said, it's just like you're running Windows on a console just wouldn't work, because the way in which that communicates with the software is just a lot different, and you can't expect that to work universally. Like, it's just not. And I think that's the case in point with, like, as I said, with phones and running a desktop OS as well. It's just like, even though they've got Windows for ARM, and that's certainly a big thing that they're trying to push, it isn't it just isn't to the point yet where it's not a universal thing, and I don't think it ever will be. They'll get it to the point where it's functional, and you can probably run some things on it, but you can see the performance difference already. It's quite significant when you're running equivalent games and stuff through Steam. So it's just don't do it. Just a PSA out there for everybody that basically just don't do it.
Pretty much.
Yeah. So that's topic one rattled out there. I had this on the thing this is quite an old article, but I might as well just cover it anyway because I had it sort of set back from another show. The Z690 Dark. What? Mm-hmm. This is just mental, right? Like the LJ 1700 At 12th gen, yeah. And it's mental. It's going to be, like, they're just rattling through a few pictures there. It's interesting that they've got 3 M.2 slots on them, actually. I was quite... Because normally they keep that sort of extra stuff to a bit more of a minimum compared to the other models, because they're like...
Yeah.
They want to keep things out of the way. Obviously, they've got the 2-way SLI with proper spacing, 4-slot spacing, which is brilliant.
Mm-hmm. For airflow, definitely need that.
Yeah, for sure. They've got also, I think... Hang on, what does it say here? Just reading the document here. Yeah, it's got a 2.5 gig LAN port on it. I mean, on an overclocking board, it's just... And Wi-Fi, I mean, it's kind of interesting. I find that quite interesting.
I think it's when you get to a certain level of board, there's like the expectation of not just Wi-Fi, but the Wi-Fi chip, you have to remember, also houses Bluetooth.
Yes, it does. Yeah.
So I think that's probably why they included Wi-Fi, was for the Bluetooth spec, because they probably got Wi-Fi 6E and then Bluetooth 5.2 on there.
Yeah.
Sorry, my brain turned off for a minute. The point previous to Wi-Fi. Oh, the 2.5 gig LAN. That's something that's common on a lot of ports for internal networking. Like I have 2.5 on my system, and then I also have a 1 gig on my system as well. So I have both. But if I wanted to do some high movement transfer on like a DAS or something, or a NAS even, and I wanted to do direct connect to 2.5, there would be that benefit there. But that would be the only reason to use it.
Yeah.
And I think that you have to also consider that these boards aren't just made for market A or market B. These are worldwide boards where you're looking at places like Europe that have 2.5 or even 10 gig networking in houses in some cities. So the 2.5 gig LAN isn't necessarily out to lunch per se, but it is definitely overkill for markets that don't have that fast of speed of connection yet.
Yeah, I was just thinking because with overclocking and like the community around it, like a lot, like they try and keep it minimal, right? Because they want to, if things go wrong, then they don't want to upsetting the whole system, and it's like adding extra bits and pieces in where people probably feel it's not needed as such. Like a lot of people, even who do, like I've seen, who do overclocking professionally and stuff, they don't even have the system hooked up to the internet. Like they don't even upload their scores directly from the computer itself, because they don't want driver updates coming to it. They don't want software loading on it. They don't want things running in the background that could be using the internet connection. But I get the thing about the Bluetooth actually, because I think EVGA's got a feature where you can control certain aspects of the board through Bluetooth, through like your phone or something. Yeah, the EV
or a tablet or something like that. Yeah.
So I'm just thinking maybe that's as you said, maybe that's why they've got it, because not just the Wi-Fi, because I don't imagine people would actually go to the, like, it almost seems like they're trying to consumerize this board a little bit much if they're actually dedicating Wi-Fi onto this. But there's a Type C. Oh, there's no internal Type C. That's good. Oh, they do an internal Type C header. Oh, that's weird.
Yeah.
Why do they have an internal Type C connector for? Yeah, there it is there. That's so strange. And there's a U.2 port as well. What uses U.2 nowadays? Seriously. That's so weird.
Nothing.
No. I was going to say, I was like, U.2 is like, I think the Intel 750 SSD was the first and only thing, unless you buy like a server grade SSD, that uses U.2. And even they use M.2 now, because they've got their own M.2 spec for servers that are kind of weird, right? Like it's almost like it looks like a U.2 connector, but isn't. But that's strange. I don't know why they'd bother putting that on there. I just thought I'd pick that up while we're looking at it.
Yeah, it definitely was a weird choice on their end. I don't know what their point was behind that, but
yeah,
maybe they got something. Maybe they're going to put it a U2 physics processor. Who knows? I've seen Nvidia do stupider things, so I wouldn't be surprised if they're just like, by the way, you can buy this extra module we didn't include. It's like, why the fuck not?
Yeah, exactly right. Exactly. Yeah. I'm going to add some text in. So I hope I've got it here. Yes, I do. and then we're going to add this in. Check GDI Plus. So this is me just doing a half-assed stuff stream here because I didn't get this prepared earlier, but I didn't think it'd be a problem. Cool. All right. Well, that is it. I think we've got one more topic. The base mark, another ray tracing test. This is kind of interesting. They need more ray tracing tests. I hope it's actually going to be more, because I think like it's still immature in terms of like support in games and in game engines and stuff. Even though it's been around a few years now, they need something that's like compatible with both systems equally, right? I think that's ultimately what they should be aiming for, and I know that's quite hard to do because of how differently the systems are implemented. But this looks like it could be promising in that fact that it uses Vulkan and DirectX.
I think it's going to either have... I haven't used this benchmark myself
no,
yet,
neither
but it
have I.
Probably has like an... sorry?
No, I haven't used this benchmark yet.
Okay.
No, yeah.
I'm thinking it's either going to have an auto sense or it'll ask you to pick, Nvidia or AMD.
Yeah.
And they say cross-platform because I think they're going to start using this like for console testing as well, because consoles do support ray tracing, the new ones, right? So.
Yeah, and I think maybe it's going to be support for Linux as well, so you could run it on. Maybe it'll run on phones.
Multi-OS there. I see.
Maybe it'll run on phones as well, perhaps, because that'd be kind of cool to. Because they've got a lot of AI processing in phones now too.
It'll be a great way to test phones, like actual processor performance, like say the new Apple versus the new Samsung or whatever, and have just like a direct like output score of graphical performance.
Yeah, because like a lot of them, like there's obviously 3D Mark Mobile that's been around a good while, but they haven't really updated that for a good, they a little bit behind, and maybe someone coming out of the gate with something that truly is, like platform agnostic to be able to measure ray tracing performance. That'd be kind of cool, because they need to work out a way to make it as non-discrete as possible with what type of place, like an actual this is the numbers and this is what you can expect no matter what you're going to be using. I think that'd be kind of cool to see. So that rounds us out there. So we've got about how long do you have today, sir, before we need to end up this up?
Probably another 10 minutes or so.
Okay, 10 minutes, cool. Alrighty, that's no worries. Okay, well, chat, if you've got your keyboards fired up, then please feel free to have a bit of discussion. Is there anything that you had that come to mind about that a little bit off the topic sheet today, or something you want to discuss a little bit more in depth with the topics that we have covered as well? Now's your opportunity, or to ask me anything at all about tech and stuff, because now it's the floor is completely open with that. So just whatever sort of comes to mind in some way, feel free. Now's your chance, I suppose. Is there anything that comes to mind with so actually there is actually one thing I did want to ask
Sure.
Do you have any IT qualifications? Did you
so I have 2 computer science degrees, one in programming, one in networking.
Okay.
And then I have a handful of certifications that cover almost the entire alphabet except for Q and Z.
Oh wow! Okay, yeah.
I've done a lot of training. I've had a bunch of jobs. I've worked at Dell. I worked at IBM. I worked for Comcast for a short while. I've been around the block a couple of times, and it's the job I'm in now works out really well because of the way that it's positioned. Like I work 4 10-hour shifts. I get to talk about hardware and video games all the time, which is like a real passion of mine.
Yeah.
The idea of just getting some degrees or getting over certified or however you want to put that. I'm definitely over educated for what I do, but I also have a large passion for what I do. And it makes it, a lot more flexible and gives me better work-life balance. Like I've worked office jobs. I worked, like I did, like IT stuff in office or whatever else. And it's like, I'm on call, and like they call me at like 3 a.m. Oh, the server's down. You got to come in and fix it. And it's like, I'm trying to fucking sleep.
Yeah, I know, right? Yeah. Absolutely.
So, and what I'm doing now, because of the way that it works out, like we're like kind of commission based,
right?
And with the volume that my store puts out, I actually make way more money doing what I'm doing now than I've done in any job.
Wow.
So it just, and then it gives me the flexibility to also get into streaming and gaming and like music production, and it just like it gives me so much work-life balance that it's nice to have that flexibility, at least while it lasts anyway.
Absolutely.
And these kind of things never do, but at the same time, it's like it's going to be around for a while. So
nice, yeah. So, yeah, that's really neat, actually. Interesting, because I think I did remember you saying that a little bit of what you just said, but I sort of hadn't quite. I don't think you'd covered that in that depth. So, yeah, well, very cool. Because I've always found networking to be interesting, and like, unfortunately, they used to teach that just as a course here.
Mm-hmm.
But you can't just go and learn networking here anymore, because I've got a couple of certificates, and and like obviously the majority of the degree is just programming, and I've never really sort of felt programming as my passion. It's something I sort of need to do rather than something I want to do, because to get any IT job where I'm at, you need a degree, and it's like and like I don't like I guess like to fix a computer you don't need to know how to program it, right? And like
not at all. No.
And it's crazy that that's sort of the expectation that they have, considering like I've been tinkering around with things for at least 10 years plus probably, and it's like, and then there's something I've always taken away with one interview I had with one of the shops that we've got. There's only 2 shops here in my city, and he's a complete arse, and I'm quite open about saying that the boss is just someone I'll never really get on with. But there's one thing I've taken away with the conversation that he had. He said, "Look, I've hired people from all over the world. I could probably believe him because he seems like the type of person who would, and people with university degrees, really high, really high marks and things. I've had them come over here, and I've actually had to teach them a workflow with how to fix computers, because they don't get the practical skills, and it's like, because they're just, and it's like, yeah, sure, they are passionate about computers, sure they've probably done a lot of work with them and things like that, but they don't know what the process is. They don't know how to go about diagnostics and the real practical stuff that turns how to efficiently do your job, because obviously if there's a queue, you got to get through it, and it's like that's the part that would be a very small aspect of my training if I didn't need any training at all, because that's something I've self-taught for, as I said, that period of time. And it's like, it's crazy that even after all those discussions we've had and the back and forth that we've had through other people as well, it's like he doesn't, is the type of person who just wants to know that everyone he's got is qualified. And it's like, well, fair enough, I can understand that aspect, but people, like, why are you hiring university graduates if that's the sort of style of person that you want? And it's crazy that you're prepared to put the time into something that you don't need to put the time in with me with. I guess it's just crazy. But so it's interesting that the 2 different styles that they teach degrees, and it's like you do a little of the practical stuff through Polytech here, which is kind of like the more technical college, I suppose you want to call it, and that stuff's cool. Like, but again, the majority of the degree is like programming stuff. Like, they do a little bit of networking, they do robotics, which is kind of cool. That would probably take me back, and maybe I'd be interested in learning about that side of things. But in terms of doing a degree because I really am passionate about programming, I might end up being passionate about programming, I don't know. It's not something I've really got on with in the past, but if I need it to get a job, maybe I might look into what that means and how I'm going to go about it. But I don't know. It's just been interesting to me, like that process of trying to talk to people about things that I'm not really entitled, well, supposedly not qualified for, when it's like, I think it's just a matter of maybe just giving things a shot, but I don't know. It's a bit of a side story there, but a bit of life experience.
It's sometimes you gotta like take those little deep dives just to figure out the next movement, right?
Absolutely.
I think when it comes to programming, it's like there's such a wide open gate of like software versus firmware versus like game development versus like the programming is such a wide range of things now compared to what it used to be. Like when I took mine, it's like, we're going to teach you object-oriented programming so that when new stuff comes out, you'll be ready. It wasn't even like you're going to learn this language and this is going to carry you through the rest of your career.
Yeah.
It was, we're going to teach you how to understand what an object-oriented language is so that when you're ready to do web development or whatever, you can just step into that role and start moving. So they gave us more of like practical knowledge, which was nice. But nowadays when you go to school and go for a programming degree, they're like, okay, do you want to learn game design or web design or software programming or firmware or like machining or like there's like 9 or 10 different paths you can go on because programming is in everything now versus how it used to be.
Absolutely. So, it's crazy. Like, and it's like, oh, you want to learn how to fix a computer? Go learn how to like make software for it. It's like, okay.
that's not it. That's not how that works at all.
No, but I suppose though, it's just an evolution of the times in a lot of sense of the word, because no one fixes crap.
Yeah.
Like, and it's like, so instead of fixing it, they just throw it away. And I suppose there's been a big debate in the US about the right to repair stuff and what's been going on in that aspect of things, and it's interesting to see that sort of roll out the way that it has. But yeah, they need people to fix to actually be taught how to fix things still. I think that's still a very valuable thing, and they don't.
Yeah, that was my first year of my degree. My first degree was like there was an entire class on break fix. And then we had to go through and like answer a questionnaire sort of like quiz thing, and then based on your quiz answers you got given specific hardware. And I did really well in the quiz, so that he handed me like the motherboard and the case and whatever you had to run off and build a computer. I did so well in the quiz, he handed me a motherboard that didn't have a PS2 connector for a mouse. So I had to install Windows 98 using a keyboard.
Wow. Crazy, yeah. I mean, that wouldn't be probably terribly difficult back then.
No, it's just tab key and keep going. But, I think a lot of the students came into the degree with very little technical knowledge, whereas I came in with, my cousins were tech. One of my parents' friends who like helped me flash my 486 my 386 into a 486 DX using an upgrade floppy drive, and like I've been doing computer stuff since I was 6 years old, like over 30 years at this point. So it's like, you kind of see this whole evolution of things, and it's to a point where like we're almost at the end of silicon, and I don't even know what's next.
No, it's pretty wild actually. Like what you're doing with like looking at carbon nanotubes or even light-based computing, like using like almost like a fiber channel, or
like quantum computing and graphene, and like there's a lot of different choices, but it's like what is going to be the ultimate material? Like what's the next concept? I think that it's going to be graphene, just because of how easy it is to make. But it's really going to be hard to say because carbon nanotubes have so much more performance. So it's like, where do you draw that technical to financial line, right?
Yeah, exactly. And like they're already looking at how to program like silicon-based computers to run quantum code as well. So they may even look at how to make like a traditional computer. They might even get rid of quantum computing almost, like there is like a dedicated quantum-based system altogether as well, and look and transfer that over to whatever's next on the edge, on the line of things too, whether that is graphene or nanotubes or whatever that may be. But there's a lot of it's not far. Like probably 5-10 years probably is where you'll be looking at what they'll look at choosing, because it's we're 3 nanometer is a thing, I think, or coming up to being a thing. very shortly.
Yeah, 4's confirmed, 3's in development, and then 2 and 1 and we're done. Once we hit 1, it's like there's nothing else we can do with silicon. It's literally the end of silicon. So
yeah, and like
I'd say probably like 10 years max, maybe 5, depending on the way things go. Just because everyone's going like pushing for smaller, right? So I think you're right that it might not take very long.
No, and it's like everything will need rewritten. Everything will need rewritten, and it's like, how what are they going to do, and in terms of being able to make that accessible, still be, whether computers will be out of consumers' hands by then, they'll have something completely different in terms of, how we use electronics in general. That transition.
Never know.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, well, I've had no questions in chat, but appreciate everybody who's come by, and all that sort of stuff. Go follow this man. If you want to drop your links in chat, I think, actually, that might be turned off. I might have to drop your link in chat. I can do that, though.
Sure.
I'll do that. Yeah, there we go. Go give this man a follow. He's an amazing guy, and he'll be. I hope that's your link. Yep, that's your link. Sweet. No, that's cool. Yeah, he's. I think I've turned it. I had it on, then I had it off, and then I think I've turned it back on again. That's weird things like that.
All good.
And when are you going to be live next? Actually, that's a question.
In about 10 minutes or so.
Okay, all right. Okay, that's why you're ending up stream. I see. All right. Okay, all good. Alrighty. Yeah. Well, we'll definitely. I'll certainly leave you tabbed as I'm needing to be out for the afternoon as well. But thank you very much for coming by.
Thank you.
And maybe we'll see you again in the near future. That would be really cool.
Sounds good.
Great chats. Really great chats. Awesome stuff.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay,
appreciate it.
You go get ready. I appreciate you. Thank you very much for coming by, and enjoy the rest of your afternoon or day or evening or time zone, wherever you're at.
You bet.
Yeah, cheers. Okay.
Have a good one.
Thank you. You too. Cheers. Bye-bye. All right. Cool. All right, webcam scene. Thank you very much, everybody, for coming through. Don't forget to rate, comment, favorite, subscribe. I'm not going to end up right now, but please be happy to follow the content. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, Hardware Talk NZ, for the Facebook group as well. And I'll see you all in the next episode. Peace out for now. Bye bye. Okay.